Welcome to the Pat White Show.
Much has been said about Jeffrey Epstein, both pro and con. When the Republicans were in charge, they wanted information about Jeffrey Epstein, Martin Luther King's assassination, JFK's assassination, and some of that documents have been released. Some of it has come out, sort of like the JFK thing. It wasn't quite the way you thought it was. All right, that's just a fact. Now, involving the Jeffrey Epstein situation, the Republicans wanted to get all this out there, get the information out there. Jeffrey Epstein, what client list he had, who was on that list, and some stuff was released in binders. A lot of it was redacted, and names were out there. Everybody who flew on his planes, those were listed. Some probably were very, very innocent. Some were doing it for business reasons. But the Republicans said, we want to get it all out there. Well, ultimately, Pam Bondi came out and said, there is no client list. I've given you what I could give you, and beyond that, there's no client list. Well, everybody's up in arms. Oh, how dare they do that? How dare they do that? We know there's something there. Well, now the Democrats have taken up the same thing, and that's where I find it curious. The Democrats are going, they're holding back information on Jeffrey Epstein. And I'm thinking, why are the Democrats complaining about it now? For the 4 years of Biden, they were quiet as a church mouse about this. Didn't want to discuss it. But now they want to discuss it. Well, suddenly that tells me this whole thing is political. That's what this is all about. Professor Alan Dershowitz. There he is. There's Professor Dershowitz. You might remember him. He was an attorney who represented the O.J. Simpson case. He was on O.J.'s side. All right, same Alan Dershowitz. Harvard professor, been a professor for more years, and, more years you want to talk about. Well, he was on TV. Every night, 5:30, he has his Alan Dershowitz's law class, and that's about what you could call it. I happen to watch it quite a bit, learned some stuff. But last night he said, there's an upcoming editorial, op-ed, if you will, in the New York Times or in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post, talking about this entire Epstein thing. And the reason he does this is because when Jeffrey Epstein was charged in federal court, Alan Dershowitz was his attorney. Okay, you want me to repeat that again? Alan Dershowitz was the attorney for Jeffrey Epstein. Let's get that clear so you know what's going on here. He said he rode in his airplane a lot of times, a lot of other attorneys working on the case. But he said, here's the deal. He said, you know what? I have seen all the files. I've seen everything. I know what's going on. I was his attorney, so I know everything. But here's the problem. There's no client list. The only thing the courts have and the Department of Justice has are affidavits. Affidavits are sworn statements by people accusing somebody of something. And those are the affidavits that right now, Pam Bondi, she can't do anything with because the courts have sealed them. They have been sealed. Alan Dershowitz says, they're sealed. They're in court. There's no way I as an attorney can release them. There's no way anybody can release them unless the courts, the federal courts, want to release these sealed affidavits. And they can if they want to. And it should be up to the media to go to the courts and say, hey, release these. But Mr. Dershowitz, Professor Dershowitz, call him whatever you want, said the people in there out of politics, some are already dead. There's not enough names there to do anything. But he said, that's all that's in there. He said, there's nothing else in there. There's no client list. Epstein didn't have that. Now, his girlfriend, Ghislaine, she's doing 20 years in prison. She wants to go in front of Congress and spill the beans. Well, if she wants to do that, she's entitled to do that. It'd be interesting to see what she has to say. But right now, Professor Alan Dershowitz is Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer, said the courts have affidavits. They don't want to release them because there's names of people. You know, if you're accuser of somebody, you want your name protected. And obviously, if you're named in an affidavit, you don't necessarily want your name out there unless they got proof to, charge you. So the courts have restricted anybody from saying anything about the affidavits regarding Jeffrey Epstein. These are just accusatory affidavits. So understand something. Yes, the Republicans and people like me and a lot of other folks wanted to know what was in there, who did what to whom, who killed JFK, who killed Martin Luther King, and obviously the Jeffrey Epstein case to see what people were bad in government or wherever. Well, we know what we know. But now suddenly the Democrats, they want to use it and say, oh my God, they were holding up, they're turning it into a political case, which tells me there not may be anything there that anybody can fight over. But when the Democrats are suddenly saying we want information, and 4 years ago they wanted nothing, something's up, folks. Everybody's playing a game here. And that game is over nothing but making political points. I'm just bringing this up so you understand. If you want to read it for yourself, it's in today's Wall Street Journal. Read what Professor Dershowitz says. He said the allegations are by the court. They are sealed. They can't be opened unless the courts open them up. And that's all there is. You may not like it. I may not like it. But that's all there is. And this is from Jeffrey Epstein's attorney. If you can't buy into that one, well, you ain't going to buy into anything. And you might as well go on considering that Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. If that's what you want to believe, go right ahead. I'm just saying, this is the latest information, and it comes from the mouth of the attorney who represented Jeff Epstein. Now you know, and decide what you want to do with it. It's your call. The preliminary report involving the Air India 787 that crashed over a month ago has been released. And right now, what they're thinking is, well, something happened in the cockpit. And I'm going to tell you what it is. And I'm also going to tell you what a 787 captain told me when I told him all the circumstances that they had discovered involved in this particular accident. And let's take a look at the accident in particular. Now, on your screen, you're going to see who the individuals were flying the plane. On this particular date, the first officer was doing the takeoff, his turn. His name is Cleve Kundar, and he was at the controls, and the captain was his backup in this particular situation. They took off and started flying. And once you get the right speed, you launch the aircraft, it gets up in the air. Normally what happens is once you get a positive rate of climb, indicated on your altimeter, you call gear up, and the co-pilot, or who's ever the second officer, if you will, pulls up the gear, and that just starts the process. But you'll notice if you watch the video, the gear never came up. And because the gear didn't come up, something was going on in the cockpit. And as it was, right around that time when the plane took off and got around 400 feet in the air, the two control switches. Now, I want you to see those switches in particular. Let me flip this over here for you to see. There, take a look at that. Those are the two fuel control switches that are right below the throttles. And that's the way it is in a lot of different airplanes nowadays. Fuel control switches turn the engines off. So when you come in, you're ready to shut the engines down. The switches are spring-loaded. And this means something simple. You have to literally pull them up because there's a spring detent. Pull them up, and then you can turn them off or on. But you must pull them up to get the spring out and clear a locking section right here below the switch itself. So you've got to get out of that detent and be able to pull it out to flip it down. Two of them. That's the way you shut the engines off. You can't just walk over to it and go, hey, I'm going to flip the hand, and it drops down. Doesn't work that way. These are detent spring-loaded. So, that being said, according to the report, they said somebody switched off the engine control switches. There's two of them, but they were switched off in 1 second sequences, which means this. One was shut off, and then 1 second later, the other one was shut off. That takes someone pulling out the spring, pulling down the detent, and dropping it down to the lower area, which means off. Someone had to do that. one person in the airplane in the cockpit, I presume it was the captain, saying, "Hey, did you turn off the fuel control switches?" And the other person saying, "No, I didn't do it." But at that moment, things were going to go bad, and they were going to go bad fast, because that plane, without the engines, without the thrust, very heavy, hot, it was going to start coming down, and it did. Well, apparently the captain took control of the aircraft at that point, so I got the aircraft, flipped the fuel control switches on to see if we could get the engines to start up. Now, they were already in a spool down situation. Trying to get them start up wasn't going to be enough because, frankly, it didn't work. And the plane keep going down and keep going down. And we know what happened. Ultimately, the plane crashed and killed 270 people. Now, here's the deal. The FAA had put out a special notice saying, hey, these detent switches could become, have an issue with them. But it was not for the 787. It was for a 737. Now, the design is pretty much the same for the 787, but it was for the 737. Therefore, it wasn't checked in this particular airplane. But when they were coming down, some things happened. You probably heard about this. You heard they say, well, there's something came down the bottom of the airplane. It's called a RAT, ram air turbine. It comes down, hits the wind stream, starts power going. Put some power to the controls so the pilot's got some controls over the things that are going on, and that's how it keeps control. But also, when they turn them back on again, suddenly the auxiliary power units came back on. They're in the tail of the airplane like a little jet back there, provides electrical and air conditioning and stuff. When you get on an airplane, you see, hey, everything's out and running. Well, that's the auxiliary power unit that does that. So they were trying everything they could to get that plane to come back to power. And without power in those engines, that giant airplane is going to sink. And it did sink. You saw it on TV. You saw the explosion. And that huge ball of fire was because that plane was loaded with jet A, gasoline, if you will. When that crashed, that plane was full of gasoline. And man, it went up as a torch, killing all those people. Now, I had the occasion to talk to a friend of mine who flies that airplane here in the United States, and we were talking about what was going on. And he said, maybe the switches were in the center position, and the gravity came in and flipped them down as they rotated. I said, well, here's the deal. According to the report, the switches were turned off within 1 second of each other. He looked at me and he said, what? I said, yeah, whoever did it pulled it out. One was pulled out and pulled down. And 1 second later, the second one was pulled out and pulled down. He said, then it ain't an accident. I said, what? He said, can't be an accident. That was done specifically by someone. And I said, what do you think it was? He said, well, you got two people in the cockpit. You got the captain and the first officer. Which one it was, there's no telling, because the final report's not going to come out until maybe a year from now. But right now, he's thinking that it was probably the first officer who had some sort of death wish. I can't guarantee that and say that was him, but I can tell you right now, according to a 787 captain, what happened can't happen. And what did happen was somebody flipped those switches off intentionally. And right now, the person who was flying the aircraft, whose hands were on the throttle, right there on the throttle, but below that throttle area is those two switches. Somebody flipped them off. Was it the captain who flipped them off? Or was it the first officer? Right now, the cockpit voice recorder doesn't let us know, and we're not really sure who it is. But apparently, someone in that cockpit apparently had a death wish. That's exactly what a 787 pilot thinks. Is he right? We won't know till maybe a year from now. Or we may never know. It's just how it all works out. So did you know that the Izaak Walton League in Fort Wayne, Indiana is the largest Izaak Walton League in the entire state of Indiana? Yes, it is. And you know what makes it really cool? We have so many different things available at our facility, you might not believe it. Now, if you're someone who happens to be into hunting and that kind of thing, you know what we have? We also have one of the largest and finest rifle and pistol ranges here in northeastern Indiana. Yep, Izaak Walton has it. and NRA certified RSOs are on duty at all times. And then maybe you're into trap shooting. We have one of the best trap shooting facilities in the northeastern area and home to a lot of other teams from high schools, even that practice on our field. And skeet shooting, yes, we have that too. So if you're into trap shooting for the outdoor hunting kind of guys, we've got the full trap range for it. Now, if you're into archery, and many people are, we've got a complete archery range with 3D animals. Not many places even can offer that. We do at the Izaak Walton League. Just like roaming around the forest, we have 3.5 miles of groomed forest areas for you to wander through. People come out, take their dogs, like to cruise around, have a good time. We've got that. And if you're into fishing and camping, Walton Pond. You don't need a fishing license to fish on our pond. And if you like camping, we've got full camping facilities just as well. So whatever you happen to be into for you, your family, well, think about the Izaak Walton League. We've been around since 1924. And you know what? We serve families. We've got about 600 members in our chapter. And Izaak Walton is located on the northwest side of town, right next door to the Girl Scout McMillan Camp. So if you and your family really love the outdoors and all the things that it brings with it, well, stop looking at your cell phone. Start looking at a great place to go. The Izaak Walton League of America. We've got it all. Shooting, fishing, you name it. We've got it at Izaak Walton. Check us out at iwla-fw.org. That's iwla-fw.org. Izaak Walton League of America. Best membership you'll ever have. So did you ever watch on television and see the video showing these massive crowds protesting one thing or another? Pretty much you see them all the time. Sometimes you say to yourself, where do these people come from? You know, how do they come up with this crowd? What are they doing? What's going on here? You see them walking around with their signs and drawn up signs and pictures and balloons. You name it, they got it. But where do these people come from and why do they all come together? Well, it turns out, if you didn't know this, there's an organization in California, Beverly Hills, California, headed up by a gentleman by the name of Adam Schwartz. And here's a picture of him. Adam Schwartz is the CEO of a group called Crowds on Demand. You heard me right. Adam Schwartz is the CEO of an organization of business called Crowds on Demand. And his job is to create crowds to protest whatever they want to protest, as long as Mr. Schwartz's company is paid. Recently, he was offered $20 million. You heard me right, $20 million to stage a big giant protest against Donald Trump at one of these events. I don't know what it was. Came out and said, you know what, I turned it down. He said, didn't want to do it, $20 million, but frankly, we look bad. Why do you say that? Well, because some of these crowds coming in starting to make people figure, hey, what these crowds are legit. Turns out what Schwartz does, he contacts these various advocacy groups, offers them money. Say, we'll give you $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. Get your people together to be part of this crowd to advocate something, against something, whatever it is. They're paid money to groups and organizations to go out and protest. Hey, blue hair people out of people's basements. Hey, come on, we'll give you money. Here's $20, $50. Protest. That's exactly what Crowds on Demand does. And if you wondered about that, some of these various crowds and organizations you see on marching through the streets, and you see all kinds of weird people, but they've got these prepared signs. They got these blow-up animals. They're doing whatever they can, and they're protesting, well, whatever it is, mostly government. And lately they're protesting the president and his policies. But it turns out there are companies out there, and this happens to be the biggest one. Crowds on Demand. If you haven't seen it, better pay attention, folks, because that's where these things are coming from. Organizations and groups that people with big money, Like I said, Adam Schwartz turned down a $20 million offer to stage a big giant demonstration. Said make us look bad. Somebody's got that kind of money and they just want crowds to protest to figure it's going to influence you. Well, maybe you're starting to figure it out. Some of these crowds are nothing more than ne'er-do-wells coming out to make a couple extra bucks to buy whatever it is they want. Hey, let's go out and protest. We make money. Advocacy groups are doing this. And they're making like $10,000. So understand, that's what's going on. Not all crowds, not all groups are part of this. But many of the organizations and the big giant events you see on TV are sponsored by companies like Crowds on Demand and Mr. Adam Schwartz, their CEO. His job is to make money, and making money by getting crowds to go out and protest whatever it is someone wants them to protest. It's a game, folks. This is how it's being played, and hopefully you aren't being conned by it. Or maybe you are. Well, if you're one of those people who listens to the radio, whether it's AM or FM, the chances are that you've heard a commercial during the radio hour that you're listening to from Sean Hannity, talking about we need to save AM radio. Keep AM radio out there because AM radio is a lifesaver. Something happens, you got to have AM radio to understand what's going on and emergency action. Well, there's a certain degree of truth, is what he's saying, but has society changed so much that maybe the truth doesn't matter? Because in Congress, there's currently a bill. It's the AM Radio and Car Act, or something, words to that effect. And essentially what they're saying in this act in Congress is that car makers, Ford, Chevy, new car, whatever, foreign, all would have to have in the car with the radio, it has to have the AM band. Now, why is that? Well, because they say, well, people need the AM band to find out what's going on, the emergency stations. You know, WOWO, 50,000 watt AM station, that was one of the many 50,000 watt stations across America that were designed so everybody could hear what was going on an AM station if some sort of disaster happened. And they were to be notified. They'd basically tell everybody else with their AM signal. And WOWO wasn't the only 50,000 watt station. There were many of them around the United States, but they would all broadcast emergency messages. Well, that was in the AM days. You see, back in the 1980s and 1990s, something came into being in radio that, well, hadn't been there for a while, but suddenly was taking over. You see, back in the old days, the only thing you saw in a car radio when you bought a car was an AM radio. Yep, that was AM. But back around the 1990s, the folks over at Toyota decided in their cars to put not just AM radio in their car radios, FM radios. Well, suddenly people were going, FM radio, why do I want this? Turns out the signal was so much cleaner, especially in thunderstorms when you heard all the crackle going on. That's the thunderstorm stuff. FM didn't have that. And going into buildings where traditionally you would lose the signal from the AM station, FM would go into buildings. Well, FM then became very popular, and everybody switched to FM. As a matter of fact, even stations like WOWO, they went from AM to FM because now they realize FM is where it's at. FM is where it's happening. But involving emergency messages, here's something that you probably haven't thought about. Let's say an emergency situation happens. Well, today in the world, suddenly, not only will your phone go off, but your watch will go off and everything else, because now the police system is designed to give you an emergency notice via your cell phone, by your computer. Literally, when anything happens, suddenly you get a big message that goes through all sorts of communications, whether it's phones, TVs, whatever. Everybody gets the same message. And now it's done by computer systems that lock into everything else and they hit you with the message. Everybody knows those things. So, do we keep AM radio? Well, that's a very good question, because if something bad happens and the FM stations all go offline, if all the various alert systems go offline, would AM stations be still there to broadcast? And the reason I bring that up is because many, if not all, AM stations, especially 50,000 watt radio stations, have what is known as backup power. They have this big giant generators outside of their buildings that make electricity. And that electricity will come on, that generator will power that station to allow them to alert you on the AM band. It's pretty much standard with 50,000 watt radio stations. So you have to ask yourself, well, do we really need to get rid of AM? Because, well, the car makers would love to get rid of it. One less thing they have to put in the car. Saves them money. But should we abandon AM radio? That's the big thing. So you hear Sean Hannity going, oh, we need to save AM radio. It's important. Well, to a degree, he's probably right. Are there other ways so we can get information? And we do get information every single day. Yes, there's the emergency alert system, like I said, through your cell phone, through your watch, through your computer, through your tablet, whatever. But if all of those systems don't have any electricity, if the electricity goes down, and there's no electricity to power the FM station, no electricity to power the computers, and no electricity that you have, the one way you will be able to get information that you need is via AM. Now, we used to build AM stations as a kid, man. You do it with wire coils and things like that. You can make your own AM station. It was AM radio. It's really easy to do. There were kits and everything you can do. But is AM still needed in today's world? Like I said, all the power goes out. Nobody's got electricity. 50,000 watt radio stations have backup generators. They turn on, they can make signals happen. And those signals can tell you and everybody else in the world, everybody in your family and everybody around the United States with these 50,000 watt radio stations everywhere in America, that, hey, something's going on. Here's what's happening. Here's what you need to do. Here's the emergency alert system. Now, way back when Bob Seaver was on WOWO years ago, the Air Force sent out a mistaken message, and WOWO, like other stations, ran it. It was an error, and they had to come back and apologize. But the system did what the system does. It alerts folks. So, should we get rid of AM radio? In the current situation, if everything goes down, the power goes down, and computer goes down, and there's no electricity in America, 50,000 AM stations have generators. They can generate a signal and tell you what to do, where to go, and what's going on in your world. Something to think about. So maybe this act that they're working on in Congress, bipartisan, should be passed. That car radios need to stay with the AM in it. As a matter of fact, maybe having AM in everything you've got wouldn't be a bad idea. It helps you know what's going on and realize if everybody loses power, AM stations have backup generators. They can fire up the station and send you a signal. Something for you to think about. If you don't have AM, what are you going to do when the world goes to heck in a handbasket? Just a thought. Just to clear up legal issues, I happen to be an IU parent. I didn't go to IU, but I sent my daughters to IU, so at least I'm entitled to talk about Indiana University, and that's what I'm going to do. Well, as you may or may not know, long time ago, back in the 1960s, IU had a mascot, and it was the Hoosier the Bison. And I want you to see some of these pictures of this mascot from the 1960s. I'm almost ashamed to show these, because this is the worst looking mascot I think I've ever seen. This is an abomination. And unfortunately, well, we had it then, and probably the football team back then, I don't know how good they were, but I don't know if they'd want to take that bison to any particular event. Shameful. That's all I can say. Times have changed, folks. Mascots have changed. You got to look cool. You got to look sharp. You got to look tough and mean. Well, it turns out that back last December the 16th, the Indiana University Student Congress put a bill out called Bring Back the Bison Act. The act passed, and the university has decided to, well, renew, and rebirth the bison. Hoosier the Bison. And it turns out there are artists that come up with a whole new look, kind of modern day look. So it looks like to be tough out there because, well, Indiana University's got a pretty good football team, folks. They did pretty well last year. Can they do that well this year? Nobody knows. but we want to have a strong bison, and this is what the bison looks like. Now, good-looking bison, tough, mean, could be strong, hopefully have a decent costume and come out rearing. Now, problem is, I'm not happy with the name. Hoosier the Bison? Yeah. What are they going to name the bison? Barney Bison? Bucky Bison? Bevo Bison? Bailey Bison? I don't know. I'm not sure the name the Indiana Congress or the Indiana students or whomever making the name is going to come up with this, but it's got to be a manly name. It's got to be a strong name. It's got to be a name capable of standing up to Purdue Pete and saying, yeah, watch this. That's what I want to see. I want to see a bison with a strong, manly name and who can be there standing up against the Buckeye from Ohio. And like I said, Purdue Pete. Might as well have something that looks good in the conference and looks very strong and also is capable of kicking around a Badger. That probably is deserving it. All right, let's do what we got to do. So let's get a good name for the new bison and the new buffalo. Looks strong, looks tough, looks brawny. Brawny the bison. Now, that may not be bad either. Anyway, there's some of the names, folks. Let's see what happens, and hopefully the IU, when they open their season August the 30th against Old Dominion, we got a brand new bison that goes out there and looks like it can kick butt, take names, and pass out receipts. That's what I want from the new Hoosier mascot, Hoosier the Bison, or whatever name they decide to come up with. It's got to be better than Purdue Pete. Just saying. Apparently, our friends to the north, the folks up in Michigan, are having a bit of a problem involving, business. Some bad things have happened up in Michigan. Thought I'd tell you about it just so you know, because right now, Michigan has the second highest unemployment in the entire United States. And they're only behind Nevada by 1/10 of a point. Things aren't doing too well in Michigan right now. Let me tell you what's going on, especially in Western Michigan. Turns out that 3 companies in Western Michigan are either closing or sold out. Kellogg's, right? Big company, Battle Creek, Michigan, cereal manufacturer. Well, turns out that Kellogg's has been sold to Ferraro, an Italian candy maker, and the Italian chocolate maker, if you will. And the amount was $3.1 billion. But Kellogg's split. And what happened was they have the cereal people and then the snack people. Well, the snack people became Kellanova. Well, Kellanova, when they split up back in 2023, when they split apart, the Kellanova people moved to Chicago. So their headquarters is in Chicago, and right now they are the big money maker for the Kellogg company. Kellanova is making the money. Kellogg cereal is dying. Hate to tell you, friends, but apparently people are stopping eating cereal. I don't know why they don't like cereal, but the trend is down there. Their sales are already down 3%, and it continues to drop. But the snack foods, the Cheetos, the Eggos, all that stuff that you see from the Kellanova group, those are growing big time and basically are making the most money. So Ferraro comes in and buys the Kellogg cereal company. And remember, Kellogg cereal was the one who created the cereal for the troops over in World War II. That's what they did. They were the ones who took care of that. They were also the ones who put vitamin D in children's cereal. Because children weren't getting enough sunlight, so they put vitamin D in. But that's one business that had a problem and is having a problem. There's more in the state of Michigan. The next one, Howard Miller. Now, most of you don't know who Howard Miller is. Some of you may. But if you have a grandfather clock, you have one of the classic grandfather clocks, those clocks are made by Howard Miller. And the only reason I know that is because, my wife and I have one of those clocks. And unfortunately, in our particular current home in which we reside, doesn't fit the motif of our house. But we have some dear personal friends who have I call it a chalet. It's just like nothing you've ever seen. But that style of clock perfectly fits in their house. And right now, our best friends are taking care of that clock. So when the time comes, man, it'll go to my daughter. But it's a Howard Miller grandfather clock, and it is a classic. We actually purchased that at what was known as a Saints Alive event many years ago. But our friends, Steve and Julie, they're guarding the clock for us in their chalet where it looks perfect. So, Howard Miller closing down, and they've been around for, well, since 1926, so 100 years. 100 years of making grandfather clocks, going out of business because nobody wants a grandfather clock. Because frankly, many people today don't even know how to read a clock. You got to be digital. You got to tell them numbers. Can't read the signs on the clock. That's how we're going, folks. And that ain't very good. And the last one to close, well, it's called Miller Knoll. Miller Knoll is a furniture making company in Michigan. The Miller Company then merged with the Knoll Company. I think that was back in 2023, somewhere in there. Miller Knoll Furniture. Now, they still employ 4,000 Michiganders, but they're closing down also because, well, custom-made furniture like that, it's not happening as much as it used to. I'm not sure what people are sitting on. Whether they want something from the Walmart or the Kmart or wherever they're getting it from. Custom-made furniture, classic-made furniture, apparently people are not really fond of that anymore. So here you got Western Michigan losing businesses, being sold, closing up, or just saying, hey, people don't want our stuff anymore. So like I said, the unemployment factor going on in the state of Michigan is roughly 5.5%. Nevada is number one at 5.9%. They're number two in the United States for unemployment. And here's the other big thing. It appears that people are starting to move out of Michigan. And the word is that by 2050, 25 years from now, over 700,000 people will have moved away from the state of Michigan. And 700,000 people is what constitutes one member of the United States Congress. So for every roughly 700,000 people in your state, you get one member of Congress. Don't know how many they have in the state of Michigan, couldn't tell you. But losing one member may make things difficult trying to get more money for your state. That's what's going on in Michigan. Let's hope it doesn't seep down to Indiana and have the same thing going on. Michigan right now, beautiful, beautiful state. Lots of nice stuff, lots of nice people. But unfortunately, the business in Western Michigan is starting to dwindle. And it all started with Kellogg's. And that ain't good, folks. People don't want to eat cereal. People don't want grandfather clocks. And people don't want custom-made furniture. And all of that came from Michigan. And now those jobs are dying and dwindling. What's next? Nobody knows. And now you know what's happening in our friend up north. Much has been said about what's going on in the WNBA, that's the Women's National Basketball Association, especially after another re-injury, if you will, to their star player, Caitlin Clark. You saw it on TV and seen that she was injured again. She's got a groin injury, and apparently that injury is not going to get any better. Could get worse, and it could take a lot longer to heal. Now, what does that mean? Well, you have the upcoming All-Star game involving the WNBA, and most assuredly, she's not going to be playing. She's scheduled for the three-point challenge. Not sure if she's going to do that one either. But all those things aside, what's going on right now is negotiations for the next WNBA contract. See, that contract runs out this year and does for the NBA as well. But right now, the WNBA is the big talk going on about what are they going to do? How much money are they going to get? Who's going to get the big bucks and what have you? Well, as you know, the WNBA has given an offer. They always do. The first little offer that comes out, more often than not, it's a bad offer. It's not very good. And the players go, no, that's a cheap offer. We're not doing it. It's give and take. That's what they do. But Caitlin Clark, she said, I'm not going to do that. She's trying to take care of her own team and her own players. And yes, the league is earning more money. But keep in mind, for the last 27 years, the league has been losing money. And last year, 2024, was Miss Clark's first year. And it was kind of a phenomenal year when you think about it. playing in bigger arenas, lots of people coming out. The league still lost $40 million. They've lost money every single year. And the owners are saying, hey, it's pretty nice. We're getting some money back this year and got ratings and got new deals going out and what have you. They want to recoup some of that money they've lost. Now, the players keep saying, we don't get what we want. We're going to strike. Well, let me tell you something worse that could happen. What could variably happen, and it's happened before, this ain't the first time in sports it's ever happened, there could be a lockout. A lockout is where the owners say, nah, we ain't playing, we end the season, you're getting nothing until you come back and negotiate with us with a decent negotiations where we all kind of win in this deal. Not that everybody's going to win in a deal like that, but the owners lock out the players. What could happen? You could see the league, not recover. You could see other players decide, I'm going to go overseas, I'm going to play somewhere else. Or there's a rival league going on that maybe could start up. Any of those things could happen. So be aware, folks. Just because we're talking about negotiations going on and who got what offers were given, keep in mind, the owners may very well decide we're going to do a lockout and lock out everybody and end the season. And that, my friends, would cause a great deal of consternation. It's happened before, and you figure out baseball, football, everybody's had their problems in labor and management. But in the WNBA, the owners are saying, we want to start getting the money back we've been losing for years. And the players are saying, hey, we want the big money right now. We want massive amounts. We want millions. Who's going to win this deal? I don't really know. But eventually, something's going to come to a head. And when it does, could it be a players' strike? Yes. But bigger than that, it could be an owner's walkout. Keep in mind on that, friends. So if you're thinking about what's going to happen in the coming year or the years of the WNBA, if there's a lockout, your dreams may very well be shattered. Just saying.